briefly, in about 3 minutes' time?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Kent.
Or perhaps, was it even given an allocation?
As I said, I welcome each one of us from the budget reading. Personally, I always look to the budget reading because I'm always interested, to see the allocation that has been put in place, especially in trying to combat effects of climate change. As the listeners may be aware, we read a 72 trillion Uganda shillings budget. Under the National Climate Change Act, every budget must present a certificate of climate change compliance. It's a requirement in the law that the Ministry of Water and Environment should be able to issue a climate change compliance certificate.
I'm waiting to hear whether it had that 10% for such fights, environment and conservation.
I'm coming to that. And that's the requirement of the law. Of course, it is quite disturbing that at the end of the day, you are told during the presentation that they received the certificate, but in most cases this certificate is never made public for some of us to actually look at. The last time there was an attempt, they showed that the budget was performing at 60% in climate change compliance. But of course, out of the 15 areas that are supposed to be assessed, only 3 areas had been assessed. So it's a big concern. But of course, going to the figures, you saw that over 30% of the budget is actually going to, financing of debt repayment and what. And I was looking at only 5 billion that was actually made available for climate disaster risk reduction.
Wait, 5 billion?
Yes, 5 billion. And the challenge we have been having, and our listeners and the colleagues.
How much are we expecting out of the 10%, which is a global call budget?
What we've been pushing for?
Are we expecting 7 trillion?
Well, we were.
Because that is the 10%.
For us, we were pushing for 5 trillion. As climate activists and environmental defenders, at least 5%. You see, you need to understand, and maybe without really pushing the conversation a little bit deep, but to bring everybody up to speed, is that we have what you call the contingency fund. The contingency fund says that 5% of the budget should be earmarked for addressing climate-related disaster risk reduction. You know that under the Public Finance Management Act, it prohibited establishing of any fund. When we were pushing for the National Climate Change Act, some of us on the front line were pushing that we should be able to establish a climate fund, which should be able to, deliberately, make some of these interventions. Because when you look at, for example, our National Climate Action Plan in the NDC framework, we need to about $28.1 billion to be able to implement our National Climate Action Plan up to the year 2030, which is about $4 billion per year, which is about 14 trillion. So you're talking about the 5 billion which was earmarked is only going this year. No, it's just that's just a drop in the ocean, because you see, I can tell you that we've been having a lot of challenges. When you look at Article 249 of the Constitution, it commands that the Parliament of Uganda should establish what we call a disaster risk reduction and management commission, which should be able to put in place. Who
is the representative in Parliament in line with environment, climate change issues?
We have.
I want to look at this in the line of who passes this without enforcing that.
You see, we have 2 committees of Parliament. We have the climate change committee, which is headed by the Honorable Songa Lawrence from Zombo, and deputized by Honorable Jacinta. The committee was very instrumental, especially under the Parliamentary Forum on Climate Change, was so instrumental in putting in place the National Climate Change Act. But time and again, the more the pushing, because when you look at, for example, you also have the Natural Resources and Environment Committee, which is now headed by the Honorable Herbert Ariko, formerly headed by Honorable Dr. Emmanuel Otara. What we've been pushing, and the challenge that we face is that, as I said in my article, that climate change is a cross-cutting issue. That you don't have a situation where you have, for example, money stand alone.
So chances are, even for that, is it 5 billion that you mentioned?
Yes.
There's likeliness that there is other billions that could eventually.
Absolutely, that's what I was going to say. That you have, if you allocate money in agriculture, we who are pushing for climate smart agriculture, then now the Minister of Agriculture will say,
you'll go and have your influence.
They say this is now for climate change.
Okay.
When you go to the Minister of Water and Environment, under the different departments, the money that is allocated to them, they actually say this is now climate change money. So the problem we have been facing is how do we disaggregate this money and say it has been able to play its role. Of course, that's the challenge, and that's why you see that as you're drawing the torch on what has been, how much has been allocated, you may not be able to trace down and say that this is the amount of money specifically for climate change because it is dropped in the different areas, and therefore for us who are calling for environmental and climate financing, budgeting, and auditing, we face that challenge because you find that every ministry, department, and agency will say we are all implementing climate smart solutions.
Yes, we might not be able to tell how much exactly goes to climate change and environmental issues, but we can be ably positioned to tell that Robert Turiachia has failed to use only 3 minutes and gone ahead to use it.